The ancients taught in terms of nature because there is a natural order to things. To know the right and true solution to any problem requires finding its correlate in nature. For example, if you were going to dust your blinds, you would start at the top blind and work your way down, dusting the accumulation which falls from the top blind to the lower blinds as you descend. This is the natural order of dusting. If you started dusting at the bottom of the blinds and worked your way up, you would have to dust the entire set of blinds again, because once you reach the top blind, all lower blinds would have become dusty again, due to the higher blinds' dust falling onto the lower blinds. If you've ever dusted before, you would have experienced firsthand the nature of dusting, and its right and proper solution. In this scenario, the right and proper solution to the problem of efficient and effective dusting is to dust the blinds from the top down. The laws of nature work in this way. You might ask, what does dusting and its right and proper solution have to do with the problems I face in my life? When you become intimately aware of the processes of nature, the answers to life's problems become abundantly clear. And the more finely tuned your knowledge, study, and intuition regarding natural processes, the more deeply and clearly you will see life's right solutions. As an example of a correlate to the laws of dusting, or cleaning in general really, a seemingly more complex issue, such as correcting a dysfunctional workplace, company, or corporation becomes much simpler and obvious. If a hierarchical system is corrupted or tainted, it runs inefficiently, counterproductively, and does not achieve optimal results. This would mean it requires a sort of cleaning, a rooting out of the dysfunctional elements, habits, systems, behaviors, and sometimes personnel, which have caused it to become so. Often, those higher up in the organization, such as managers and executives, are quick to analyze and criticize lower-tier elements, habits, systems, behaviors, and personnel as being the root cause of the organization's problems. But the natural order says otherwise. To clean up an organization, to dust off the organizational blinds, one must start at the top and work their way down. Like dusting, if you tried to fix an organization starting at the bottom, every time you worked your way up to the next tier of the hierarchy, the errant factors systemic in the upper levels of the organization would continue to filter down to the lower levels. By the time you got to the top levels of the organization, you would find that the entire organization had yet again become corrupted, and would have to start the process all over again. By starting at the top, analyzing and criticizing the flaws in the system which are intrinsic to those elements, habits, systems, behaviors, and personnel, which nest at the highest levels of the organization, correcting and extracting those problematic factors, will result in an expedited and thorough cleaning at the lower levels. A cleaning that will enjoy some degree of longevity, especially if kept clean by routine inspection and light dusting going forward. In this way, one can see how the correcting of problems within an organization, such as a workplace, company, or corporation, has a direct correlate in nature, that of the dusting scenario. When we think of solutions being found in nature, we tend to think of the outdoors, of the wild. But the term nature, in this context, simply refers to the way in which things work in the natural world. The world we all experience on a routine basis. The ways in which efficiency and effectiveness are achieved in the functioning of nature within the context of natural laws. Dust falls when brushed or swept, so one starts dusting at the top and works their way down. It would be absurd to start dusting at the bottom and work your way up. Anyone who has ever dusted will tell you as much. It seems an obvious and rudimentary concept. And yet, when we think in these terms when approaching problems of an unnatural nature, so-called, these issues which may appear at first glance to be complex, seemingly requiring inventive schemes and brainstorming sessions, meetings and memos, strategizing and hiring of outside consultancy firms, boils down to nothing more complex than a dusting of the blinds. These analogies can be drawn from the forces of nature. When looking for correlates in nature, one does not need an advanced degree in the natural sciences, though that certainly doesn't hurt. These correlates can easily be derived from the more directly experiential and common tasks which most of us face routinely, and whose solutions seem simple and plain because we have either been shown their right solution by our parents or other mentors, or because we discovered them through our own creative and analytical pursuits. We can divine the answers to a wealth of seemingly unrelated problems by observing the laws and tendencies of nature and natural processes. Natural forces such as the behaviors of animals, insects, and microorganisms, how nature both competes and cooperates within itself, the behaviors of weather systems, biological systems including plant life, chemical processes, and many more. Any natural mechanism can teach us the right solution to seemingly unrelated problems. This scenario of cleaning from the top down is illustrated rather well in popular media culture through the television show, The Super Nanny, a show in which parents call in the help of a child-rearing expert to get their children under control. Often these children have grown to be disrespectful, disobedient, difficult, emotionally unstable, and sometimes downright dangerous. To the parent's surprise, the super nanny typically spends more time correcting errant thoughts, words, and deeds of the parents than she does those of the children. The parents unknowingly plant the seeds of corruption and frustration in their own family, often perpetuating the very problems that manifest in their children. When things around you aren't what you would like them to be, looking in rather than out for the right solution is always the first step. What we think, say, and do has effects in the world we inhabit, and those thoughts, words, and deeds cause reactions and have consequences which reflect back into our own lives. We reap what we sow. Nothing happens in a vacuum. As a career classroom teacher, I have routinely encountered student behaviors and outcomes which were not in line with my expectations. When I began to discover that things I was thinking, saying, and doing contribute to those unwanted behaviors and outcomes, I became a much more effective and more efficient teacher. By the process of self-analysis and reflection, thinking deeply about the way in which I was coming across to my students, how they were receiving my demeanor, presentation of material, perceived investment in them personally, content knowledge, behavior modeling, tone of voice, relating the material to their lives and experiences, and engaging with them as people and not as test scores or as a paycheck, I found that the behaviors and outcomes my students manifested were more in line with my expectations. When I stopped blaming the students for poor performance, poor behaviors, and poor attitude, and started to change myself, my approach, my outlook of them as people, I became a much better teacher and a better person along the way. This does not mean that everything suddenly became perfect and that problems and conflicts didn't arise. It just means that my response to those problems was more measured, meaningful, and balanced with the situation. The students knew that I cared about them as people, which made correcting issues more fluid and effective. Doing what I could to soften my approach so that walls were not set between us, blocking communication, and causing defensive reactions by either party, reflected to the student that I saw them as a person of value and that there was always the opportunity for redemption. This approach reflects one of my favorite Zen sayings, "Be water." As a teacher, I wanted to flow as water does, always moving forward, circumventing obstacles in the current gently and without use of excess force. Those obstacles that could be moved would be moved effortlessly. Those which stood firm would either conform over time or be navigated without conflict. Water doesn't ask for immediate results from the rocks that lie in its stream. It encourages them along, smoothing them out over time, until eventually they work symbiotically with the current. In this way, the water gets to be water, and the rock gets to be rock, neither being forced to be anything each is not, but conforming to one another through the course of time. Analogies like this one can easily be found throughout all of nature. Conflicts are inevitable when conscious entities operate in close proximity. This is because living organisms have wills of their own and pursue their own agendas. These agendas do not always align. Often they clash and collide. Have you seen the merging of any two massive forces and their natural behaviors and reactions to one another? What do two cyclones do when they cross paths? Or two hurricanes? Or two tornadoes? Or two weather patterns? Stellar objects? Solar systems? Galaxies? In what ways do they find peace with one another? A state of stasis. How does that process play out? The obvious answer seems to be that the very forces which drew them together in the first place became the source of their conflict. Initially, and for some time, there is a battling of wills, with a clashing of personalities and objectives, the smashing of force against force, one's momentum colliding with the others, until finally, at long last, those two separate forces fully merged and became one new force, with its own identity, a new and reimagined objective, momentum, and peace, what we might refer to in our own lives as a sort of understanding, and establishing a rebirth, peace, harmony, and synchrony in the aftermath of conflict, chaos, violence, and destruction. All we can control is ourselves, and we're not even very good at that. We can try to be mindful of the role we play in others' lives, and even that is limited to the degree that another person will allow. Beyond this, we have no control, but there is still a natural order to achieving desired outcomes. The founders of the ancient peace traditions always taught and spoke in natural parables and correlates. Even the most well-known philosophers of our time have done and continue to do the same. Many catchphrases, witticisms, and sayings of which we are familiar to one degree or another are directly associated with nature and natural processes. As right as rain, get an edge on the competition, waste not, want not, and a stitch in time saves nine. These are witticisms directly rooted in natural law. The teachings of all of the ancients are steeped in nature and natural law. The Tao Te Ching of Lao Tzu, the Analects of Confucius, and the parables of Jesus, and more recently the writings of Benjamin Franklin, to name a few. The ancients taught that there are three paths to truth: intuition, the way of the sages; nature, the way of the scientist; and culture, the creative works of man, the great masterpieces of literature and the arts. Our focus here is upon nature as the path to wisdom. The others we will discuss at another time. The natural order is as true in nature as it is in the problems we encounter in our daily lives. The study of nature and its laws is the deepest, most profound wisdom one can garner. If you do not know nature well, you will not easily find the simplest, most effective and efficient solutions to the problems you face. The right and true is not a guessing game. It is not an unsolvable mystery. It does not require a reinvention of logic or the gift of cleverness and creativity. It is obvious to one who studies nature and natural law, the sciences, and all living processes. One does not have to be a scientist, lab technician, or career researcher with advanced degrees to garner such wisdom. God gave us what we need to observe nature and divine its wisdom. The greatness in the smallness is the universe's genius. Nature is the source of all wisdom, and we would do well to learn its lessons. To know God, garden,